The Fortress and the Cross, a novel of the Luftwaffe's secret war. Prologue. The Black Beast of Melun. December 12, 1942. Near Melun, occupied France. The silence was the most deafening part of the war. Not the silence of the countryside at dawn, but the sudden, shocking quiet that followed the thunder of guns and the roar of 4 great engines dying. A quiet in which the air still shimmered with the residual of violence. Major Wolfgang Kruger, a combat pilot with the scars to prove it, stood in a rain-slicked beet field outside the sleepy village of Melun. He was surrounded by a dozen grimy Luftwaffe ground crewmen, all staring at a beast that did not belong. It was a Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress, serial number 41-24585, bearing the name Wolfhound painted jauntily on its nose. Just hours ago, she had been a sovereign piece of American airspace, bristling with .50 caliber Defiance, a lead ship in the 303rd Bomb Group's 3rd raid on the railroad marshalling yards at Sotteville-les-Grands. Now she was nothing more than an exotic wounded bird, her belly smeared with mud, her massive wings tilted in a final, resigned bow to the earth. The landing gear, a testament to the Americans' quick thinking under fire, had retracted just before the impact, saving the airframe from total destruction. The pilot, a Lieutenant Paul F. Flickinger, had managed a miraculous wheels-up landing in a space barely larger than a postage stamp, a feat Kruger grudgingly respected. The crew, or what was left of them, were already in the Feldgendarmerie, their eyes wide with the hollow defeat of men who had flown 5 miles high, only to crash 50 miles from Paris. Kruger ran a gloved hand along the scarred olive-drab fuselage. The aluminum was astonishingly thick. He traced the jagged lines of a cannon shell strike just aft the cockpit. The hole was clean, but shallow. The shell had clearly failed to explode. The aircraft's legendary ruggedness was not a myth. "Look at this, Hauptmann," Kruger said, turning to his engineer, a young, nervous officer named Egon Hauser. 3 engines dead, hydraulics weeping like a child, and she still held together. She's a brick house, this flying fortress. Hauser, ever the pragmatist, was more interested in the technical details. He pointed to the massive, complex Wright R-1820 Cyclone engines. "Major, the turbo superchargers are intact. And the ball turret, it's a marvel of electric power. The Americans are not playing children's games with armament." But Kruger knew what this aircraft truly represented. Since the summer, the heavy bombing raids of the U.S. 8th Air Force had begun. They were a trickle now, but a terrifying forecast of the deluge to come. The Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf pilots of the Kampfgeschwader were losing pilots in the desperate, costly head-on attacks that were the only effective way to counter the B-17's overlapping defensive fire. Now, on the muddy fields of Melun, they had the enemy's weapon, whole, intact, and waiting to reveal its secrets. "This changes everything, Egon," Kruger muttered, the rain soaking his jacket, but he barely noticed. "This beast is coming home with us. Every rivet, every wire, every gun position will be analyzed. We will find the weakness. We must." The challenge was monumental. Transporting a 74-foot-long, 103-foot wingspan bomber across occupied France, disassembling and repairing it without the Allies, or perhaps more dangerously, without the prying eyes of the Nazi High Command ever knowing the true prize. It would require a deception campaign as intricate as the B-17's own wiring. This was not merely a trophy, it was a key to the strategies, the technologies, and the very doctrine of the American daylight bombing campaign. Kruger felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. The bomber was a silent black beast that landed on German soil by accident, but its purpose was to carry the war to their cities. By flying it, they would be flying the enemy's own war, and in the process, they would learn how to kill the myth of the flying fortress forever. The wheels of the secretive Versuchsverband des Oberkommandos der Luftwaffe, testing unit of the Air Force High Command, were already turning. The destination, Rechlin, the forbidden proving ground of the Luftwaffe. The pilot for the most audacious flight of the war, Major Heinrich von Richthofen, Kruger's closest friend and the most gifted, reckless test pilot Germany possessed. The B-17, Wolfhound, was about to receive a new set of markings, the Black Crosses of the Luftwaffe, and a new designation, DL plus XC. A shadow war had just begun. Chapter 1. The Unholy Baptism. 1. The Fortress's New Masters. March 17, 1943. Rechlin-Lars Airfield, Germany. The air in the hangar at Rechlin was thick with the scent of aviation fuel, fresh paint, and the faint metallic tang of American oil. Major Heinrich von Richthofen, a man whose lineage was as storied as his piloting record, stepped back to admire the spectacle. He was not a physically imposing man, but his eyes, the color of a stormy North Sea, held the intense, focused calm of a predator. He wore a patched-up leather flight jacket over his immaculate uniform, a testament to his disregard for parade ground polish and his deep love for the cockpit. Before him stood the DL plus XC, the captured Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress. It was impossible to fully erase the ship's American soul. Although the U.S. national markings had been painted over with the ominous black Balkenkreuz of the Wehrmacht, and a vibrant yellow had been applied to its underbelly for immediate fighter recognition, the aircraft's lines remained purely Yankee. Its tall, purposeful tail, its long cylindrical fuselage, and the four magnificent Wright Cyclone engines seemed to scorn the short, aggressive profile of the German twin-engine Hinkel HE-11s flanking it. "She's magnificent, Major," said Oberst Werner Baumbach, the commanding officer of the newly formed highly classified Special Operations Unit, Kampfgeschwader 200, KG 200. Baumbach was a bomberman by trade, a thinker whose strategic mind was now focused on sabotage, espionage, and the systematic dissection of Allied air power. A true American paradox, crude by our aesthetic standards, yet utterly resilient. Have your engineers finished their analysis? Richthofen lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up into the hangar's lofty ceiling. "For the 9th time, Oberst, we know its wiring harness is a catastrophe. Its flight controls are heavy, and the cockpit is a maze of confusion. But the turbo superchargers, the armor plating around the crew stations, and the sheer volume of firepower, they built a machine designed to survive, not necessarily to maneuver." He flicked the cigarette butt away. The Americans were right. If you build a machine that can take a beating, you don't need 1,000 fighters to protect it. You just need to fly straight. Their goal at Rechlin was twofold. First, to reverse engineer the B-17's advanced components, particularly the Sperry Ball turret and the top-secret Norden bomb sight, though they already had a complete set of blueprints thanks to pre-war espionage. Second, and most vitally, they had to understand its flight characteristics and gunnery arcs to develop devastating counter-tactics for the Kampfgeschwader. This was where Richthofen came in. He was the one who would fly the enemy's war. "The first flight is tomorrow, Heinrich," Baumbach said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "The Führer's office is breathing down my neck. They want answers. Why are these iron beasts so difficult to bring down? Are the rumors of self-sealing fuel tanks true?" "They are, and they are brilliant," Richthofen confirmed. "Tomorrow you will have your answers. But this is not an Me-109, Werner. It's a flying cathedral. I will need a crew that understands American procedures, not just German ones." 2. The crew of the DL+XC. Richthofen had hand-picked his team from the remnants of the Erprobungsstelle, the test center, at Rechlin. Hauptmann Siegfried Keller, a former Lufthansa commercial pilot who spoke impeccable American English, gained from years flying transatlantic routes. He was crucial not just for translating the cockpit labels, but for the fundamental, non-standard American approach to flight engineering. Oberlieutenant Franz Löw, flight engineer and top turret, a former Dornier mechanic with a brilliant improvisational mind. His job was to translate the B-17's complex electrical and hydraulic systems into something a Luftwaffe ground crew could maintain. He was also an ace radio operator, critical for the clandestine missions Baumbach if hinted at. Feldwebel Klaus Dietz, radio operator and waist gunner, selected for his strong radio background and his absolute discretion. He was tasked with monitoring the U.S. 8th Air Force's operational frequencies, deciphering their chatter, and, terrifyingly, practicing the art of American radio deception. The cockpit of the B-17, known to the Americans as the greenhouse, felt vast. Richthofen climbed into the pilot's seat. It was comfortable, utilitarian, and utterly alien. The controls were different, the dials were in non-metric measurements, and the sheer volume of switches, labeled things like cowl flaps and prop feather on and mixture auto lean, was bewildering. Keller, in the co-pilot seat, tapped a manual. "The checklist, Major. It's a liturgy, not a checklist, but a ritual. Before starting engines, fuel booster pumps on, all four." Richthofen smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Then let us begin the American ritual, Sig. Let us see what it is like to wear their skin." 3. The first flight. The pre-dawn light on March 17th was a chilly, metallic gray. The DL+XC, its German markings prominent and unsettling on the American airframe, was towed out to the main runway. A tight circle of flak, artillery, guns, stood guard, and every German fighter pilot within 100 miles was ordered to remain grounded. No one was to accidentally shoot down the secret weapon. Richthofen closed the hatch. The interior smelled of old hydraulic fluid and the ghosts of American tobacco. He was a long way from the sleek, high-speed purity of the Messerschmitt fighters he was used to. "Fuel selector to main tanks, magnetos to both, propeller pitch to full fine," Keller chanted, his voice perfectly calm, a bizarre mix of English aviation terms and crisp German delivery. Richthofen engaged the starters. The first engine coughed, a cloud of bluish smoke belched from the exhaust, and then the four great Wright cyclones caught, settling into a deep guttural roar. The sound was distinct, the music of the enemy. Richthofen ran the engines up, feeling the entire airframe shudder with the immense power. The controls felt heavy, resistant, requiring muscle and persistence rather than the delicate touch of a fighter pilot. Tower, DL plus XC, requesting takeoff clearance. Richthofen transmitted in a perfectly accented German, the call sign an absurd juxtaposition of the aircraft and the operator. The tower responded instantly. DL plus XC, you are cleared to immediate takeoff. Maintain a westerly heading to the boundary. Godspeed, Major. Richthofen pushed the throttles forward. The B-17 lumbered down the runway, gathering speed with surprising haste. The acceleration was slower than a German bomber, but the sheer momentum was terrifying. He hauled back on the yoke, a heavy, two-handed effort, and the fortress lifted, its massive tires clearing the tarmac. The feeling in the air was unlike anything Richthofen had ever experienced. It was not the tight, responsive dance of an Me-109, nor the sturdy utility of a Ju-88. It was a battleship. A great, stable, high-altitude platform designed to be a straight-line weapon. The controls were sluggish, the trim adjustments required constant input, but once it settled into a straight, level flight at 20,000 feet, the American design philosophy became chillingly clear. "She's a gun platform, Sig," Richthofen called over the engine noise. "A flying turret. She is simply not interested in turning." For 2 hours they ran the B-17 through its paces, climbing to 30,000 feet, where the turbo superchargers kept the engines singing with astonishing efficiency, a technological advantage the Luftwaffe still struggled to match. Richthofen could feel the cold, logical genius of the American engineers. They had built a weapon for industrial warfare. Big, simple, repairable, and built to fly for hours into hell and back. When they landed, the sun had finally broken through the clouds, illuminating the airfield. Richthofen cut the engines, and the profound silence returned, even heavier than before. He climbed out, his legs shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the immense mental exertion of flying an entirely different school of engineering. Baumbach met him at the base of the wing, his expression a mixture of awe and dread. "Well, Major?" he asked, his voice low. Richthofen took off his flight helmet, the cold air hitting his sweat-dampened hair. He looked back at the DL plus XC, the American beast wearing a German cross. He said, "We have made a grave mistake, Oberst. We have focused on speed and maneuverability. They have focused on tonnage and survival. This machine, it does not fly, Werner. It endures. And there are thousands more of them coming." He paused, then added the observation that would shock the German High Command and fuel the creation of the infamous circus of captured Allied aircraft. "To shoot one down, you must essentially destroy it. They will not simply fall apart. Our tactics are insufficient. We will have to fight their war from the inside out." The true mission of the DL plus XC was about to begin. It would fly with German crews, practice evasive maneuvers with German fighters, and eventually, in the deepest secrecy of KG-200, fly clandestine missions that would blur the lines of engagement and change the nature of the air war over Europe forever. The story of Wolfhound, the captured flying fortress, was no longer about an accidental landing. It was about Germany's desperate attempt to learn the language of its own destruction.